Story 4. So this is our special surprise story from our friend Katie.
Woohoo!
She took a nightmare that she had and she beautifully rewrote it to be an eloquent work of literature. So
yay, Katie!
We're gonna get to get a first-hand look at this future author's work. Thanks, Katie. I hope I do you justice, by the way.
Yay!
I hope so, because I'm probably
gonna...
Katie. Justice for Katie. Free Katie. Coney 2012. Katie 2012.
We should make shirts.
It's the same, style, too, the red and blue. Okay, anyway... thank you for sharing, and without further ado, I'm already stumbling. Without further ado, I'm nervous. Here we go. I'm going to speed read. My friends and I unloaded the car in the small parking lot below our campsite, nestled on a narrow strip of mountain road. Calling it a campsite was an understatement, though. A better description was a glamp site. The glamorous camping site was located on the outer edge of a small resort that was popular for its natural hot spring bathhouse and bed and breakfast vibe. On weekends, there was a farmer's market with vendors selling a variety of items that are locally sourced from the mountain and valley below. My friend, Abigail, had heard of our glam site through the grapevine and planned our whole trip. No one else knew much about this place other than that it was difficult to get to. The drive along the mountainside was winding, and the utility road up to this parking area was barely big enough for our large SUV and had to drop off on one side. By the time we had gotten out of the car, we were a bit flushed from the stress of the ride, but it didn't stop there. All right, so it's a short half-mile hike up this path, and then we'll be at the campsite, Abigail told the group, pointing towards a trail that went straight up into the forest. I like how they classify this as glamping, but you still have to hike straight uphill to get to it. It's not very glamorous, Freddie said. I knew he was trying to rile Abigail up because that was his favorite pastime. The hike was short, and Krista was the first one to the trailhead and began to lead our group. This was a horrible decision because she always sets the pace at breakneck speed. When Freddie and I commented on her near jog, she joked back, I only move this fast because I'm running away from my problems. If I sit long enough, I'll probably become the new weeping woman. We all laughed in between our heavy breathing. The rest of the hike was short but intense. Once we made it to the campsite, we were out of breath, but everyone glanced around excitedly. The space was incredible. The section we chose to glamp was an enclosed glass structure similar to a greenhouse. The floors were concrete, and there was a small kitchenette on the back wall. On the opposite side, we just came in, there were 2 glass doors. We knew from booking the site that we could open them manually, or we could turn on the automatic feature so they open on their own when it sends someone near, exactly like a store. This feature was really exciting for us because it made it seem like we could enjoy nature as easily as stepping out of a tent. I looked around the kitchen area and didn't see a welcome book, so I went through the drawers. I found a welcome brochure with a map and list of amenities at the resort. I also found a photo of 2 brothers who I assumed were previous guests. How fun! I thought about the possibility of our group taking a photo together and leaving it as our guest book entry. I checked out the map of the resort area, knowing that we were not connected to the rest of the resort and would have to walk about 15 minutes to get back to the front desk area. My friends and I were not concerned with the distance. We all thought that it would be best case scenario for glamping. We still had privacy and connection to nature, but we were only a short walk from a resort with luxury amenities. Dividing our glamping spot and the entrance to the resort was a thick, snow-covered forest filled with glittering pine trees. The mountain had just had a big snowdrop the day before, and everything was quiet and the snow was undisturbed. I felt truly at peace looking out into the distance. After settling in, everyone decided we shouldn't waste the day. It was still morning, and Abigail said there was an awesome frozen waterfall just on the other side of the mountain peak, and it shouldn't take too long. We'd be back by early afternoon. We didn't need any more convincing, so we set off. Gabe was leading the group, and he had the map in hand. He had a deep respect for nature and always forced us to slow down and enjoy the wonders around us. He was the perfect person to lead us on the hike because the forest was a cathedral of nature. The late morning sun made the snow look magical, and I could
only hear the crunch of our footsteps in the snow and the occasional rustle of an animal running around out of sight. As we continued the hike, the incline got steeper and steeper. By the time we reached the summit, the beauty had dissipated. The trees were thinning out and needleless. I couldn't hear any animals scurrying throughout the forest either. I assumed it was because the less inhabitable elevation caused that change, but I couldn't be too sure. We were practically skipping down the other side of the summit, excitement buzzing around us as we got closer to the frozen waterfall. I figured that at any moment we'd turn around a bend and see the waterfall. But not that moment, or the moment after that. I finally checked my watch and realized we must have gone off course because we would have been there by now. I hollered to the front of the group and Gabe admitted that he got turned around. We all looked at the map and were able to figure out where we took the wrong turn. As we headed back to the main trail, I noticed the clouds began to darken and snow started to lightly fall. It was mid-afternoon at this point and I realized that we were likely going to have to finish out the hike as it got dark and as it snowed. Krista said this out loud to our group and we all dug into our packs to pull out the appropriate gear. When I went to sling my backpack on, I turned to face Abigail to make sure she was settled before continuing on. She wasn't digging in her pack though. She was standing perfectly still and her face had gone pale. "We're going to be walking when the sun goes down?" she asked, eyes wide. We all circled around her, concern showing on our faces. She rattled out, "We need to hurry. We can't be out here late." Gabe stepped closer to her. "What do you mean we can't be out here late? Are there cougars or something?" She shook her head, still not moving, still pale. "Will someone please explain what the fuck is going on?" Freddie asked. That shook Abigail out of whatever haze she was in. "We need to get moving," she said, pushing past all of us in a hurry. "I'll explain on the way, but we need to walk fast." No one asked questions. We caught up to her and grouped around her, putting her in the middle so we could all hear the explanation as we hiked. These woods are perfectly safe during the day, but once the sun begins to set, it becomes more dangerous. I didn't think anything of this. We all hiked mountain peaks at high elevation, and the same is true for those. Don't be on the summit after 1. But this peak wasn't that high, so her concern didn't seem necessary. I was about to interrupt her with my thoughts, but she continued on. At first, it seems normal. The winds pick up, the snow starts to fall harder, but then she paused, changes. I lifted my eyebrow, confusion and worry filled me, but she kept talking, not realizing my turmoil. The wind feels like hands pushing and pulling you in different directions. The snow isn't falling, but hitting you in the face, almost like it's trying to disorient you, and it gets worse the closer you get to the summit. I saw Krista shiver, not from the cold, although there had definitely been a drop in temperature the closer they got to the summit. The snowfall was heavier too, and an occasional wind gust would blow the snow sideways. If you believe the stories, this wasn't a natural storm, but it seemed pretty normal to me. I saw Gabe raise his brow and say what he was thinking. How is that any different from a bad snowstorm on a mountain peak in the dead of winter? That doesn't sound like anything to be terrified of. We'll just need to be really careful. He chuckled, mostly to himself. Abigail slowed her pace a little bit. The forest is known to essentially be a Venus flytrap. It's beautiful and looks idyllic, but once you're in its domain, it wants you to get lost. Anyone that has gone off the trail in the storm has never found their way back out again. People have tried to camp out in the forest, but most don't make it back. No one really knows what happens, and when the rangers find the campsites, it doesn't look disturbed. It always looks like those people just left the tent willingly. There's never any signs of struggle. There's also never any bodies to be found. What the Are you insane? Did you bring us to a haunted forest? All of our friends shouted at once. I was frozen in fear. I didn't want to believe her, but the energy in the forest had shifted as the afternoon waned. This whole trip began to make sense. She was into the paranormal world and had always dreamed of going to one of the creepy places that she'd read about. I just didn't think she would rope all of us into it. I had no doubt she was telling the truth about this place. Her panicked expression hasn't left her face since she found out how late the day had gotten. I finally found my ability to speak, but it was a soft, "We should keep going." No one said anything as we turned and started heading back to the trail towards the summit. All of our heads were down, listening to the forest, bracing the weather as it began to turn worse as we approached the late afternoon. "Stop!" Freddie yells. We look around, turning to find anything dangerous. At once, all of our gazes landed straight ahead on the trail. The hair on my arms stood straight up. I could see blizzard-like conditions not even 20 yards ahead of us. The wind was whipping, the snow so hard I couldn't see anything past 5 yards. It was almost like there was an invisible wall separating where we were, where the wind was relatively calm and the snowfall was still gentle, and where the start of the steep incline to the summit began. The trees closest to us were barely moving in the wind, but on the other side of the barrier, I could see the pine needles holding onto branches for dear life as the entire tops of trees looked like they were being yanked back and forth. We have to be prepared for anything in there. Abigail, do you know anything else about what it's like in there? Gabe asked. Abigail shook her head. She looked terrified. She should have been. She was the one that got us all into this mess. Does everyone remember the protocol for whiteout conditions? Gabe began to pull out a rope out of his bag. We all mumbled, yes. We had started hiking in the winter a year ago and had each taken classes on emergency situations. I never thought we'd need that information though. We all quickly unloaded our packs and put on our goggles, gloves, and wind-resistant liners. We pulled on our gaiters to protect our necks and mouths. Our speech was now limited to gruff mumbles, but no one was talking. Either we were all too scared to say anything, or we were trying to focus on what was to come. I was both. My breath was shaky as I pulled my gloves and put my goggles into place. Gabe lengthened out our rope and passed it down. Each person stuck it through their belt loop. If someone fell and got hurt or tried to go off trail, everyone would feel it and could assist. Gabe looked at us, eyes serious. Grab the person in front of you too. Always hold on to their shoulder and be sure you're always checking to make sure the person behind you is still holding on to you. He looked at Abigail. You know the trail, don't you? I'm sure since you're so obsessed with this place, you know it like the back of your hand. Abigail nodded her head slightly. Good. Then you can lead us. Don't fuck up and get us killed. It was your stupid-ass idea to get us into this mess. Now you can get us out. Abigail went to stand in the front. I was holding the rear of the group. I grabbed onto Freddie's shoulder with my right hand. He was shaking. I gave his shoulder a squeeze of encouragement and we started to walk in a linked single-file line. We've got this, I thought to myself. It's just a whiteout condition on a normal hike, nothing supernatural about it. As soon as we crossed the invisible barrier, I realized I was wrong. We were hiking straight up, and the wind felt like it was actually trying to push us off the trail. At moments, I swear I felt hands grab my shoulders and shove me with all of their might. I didn't know if it was happening to anyone else, and I couldn't ask because all I could hear was the wind tearing through the trees so fast it sounded like screams. At one point, the scream sounded so real, I felt my heart rate speed up. Oh God, what if someone else went for a nice afternoon hike and is stuck up here? What if someone needs help? My thoughts were panicked and my breaths were heavy. We made it to the summit and we were going down the other side, our steps quicker now, anticipating the end of these conditions. But the wind wouldn't stop grabbing at me. I heard another scream on the wind, but this time it was coming from behind me. I whirled around, expecting to see someone. I do see something. There's a shadow just on the edge of the trail, right where I heard the scream come from. They must need help. A gust of wind pushed me from behind, and I got an overwhelming feeling that I couldn't identify, but there was no time to dissect it. I had to go help this person. I started to try and walk towards them, but felt a tug on my belt. I looked down and noticed a rope tied to me. I stared at it, confused. Where did this come from? I thought. I tried to untie the rope. It was keeping me from helping someone. I had to get untied. My shoulder started to shake, and someone entered my line of sight. It was my friend, Freddie. I hadn't seen him in months, though. What was he doing here? I was confused. I thought I was alone. I could feel my confusion leave my thoughts just as quickly as it came, and determination took over again. Freddie didn't matter because I still had to go help this person that was stuck in the storm. Freddie was still holding onto one of my shoulders and pulled his gaiter down to expose his mouth. He was trying to tell me something. It took me a moment to realize he was saying, "It's not real. Keep moving." It's not real? What's not real? I gasped, awareness shooting back into my body. It's not real. I felt my panicked desire to help the stranger disappear. It felt like an enchantment was lifted and I could see clearly. Freddie noticed that I had come to my senses and walked back around to our group in line. I took one last glance at the spot off the trail and didn't see anything. As I began to turn back towards my friends, I felt a set of hands on my shoulders. At first, I thought it was Freddie again, but the energy coming off this set of hands was wrong, like its entire presence was evil. The hand shoved me towards the forest off the trail. I stumbled but caught myself quickly and turned back towards the culprit and saw no one. It was just another wind gust. No, not just a gust of wind. Now that I wasn't in its thrall, I understood what the feeling from earlier was. Death. Death was coasting on these winds, puppeting the gusts like its own deadly doll. I feel nauseous, understanding how close I was to welcoming death's embrace. I looked forward and noticed friends waiting for me. Abigail is at the front, facing forward and shooting her left and right, like she's following the sound of two people talking. She noticed me looking and she pointed down towards something. I squinted and I could barely make out another invisible barrier. We had made it. I put my hand back on the shoulder of Freddie and we started walking once again. I kept my head down and kept chanting in my head, "It's not real, your friends are here," over and over again until I could hear something else besides screams. It was someone coughing. I looked up and saw that we had made it to the other side of the invisible barrier. The wind wasn't as loud up there, still blowing strong gusts, but I no longer felt hands touching me. We all looked over at each other, now able to breathe a bit easier, and I could hear Krista laugh. Our relief was palpable. We had made it. I untied the rope from the belt loop and passed it to Freddie. We could still faintly hear the screams on the other side of the barrier, but they sounded muffled. We kept all of our winter gear on, since it was still snowing like crazy. We continued to hike down the other side of the mountain towards the resort. The further down we got, the more gentle the wind became and the softer the snow fell. It was almost peaceful again. I let out a deep sigh of relief, happy that the wind had died down enough for me to hear the things around me. I heard the wind travel through the trees. I expected to hear a normal rustle of leaves and movement of branches, but instead, I heard a whisper. The next breeze that floated by, I heard a soft voice gently say, "Please, please come back. You have to help me. Please." Everyone in our party froze, shoulders tensing. "Did anyone else hear that?" Freddie asked quietly. I could see Abigail, Gabe, and Krista clearly shaking their heads yes. Then, a scream coming from the summit rattled through the trees. It sounded like a scream of desperation and anger. We had angered whatever was on that mountain. I don't want to stick around and find out. Freddie and I braced ourselves to run, but Abigail spun around harshly and yelled, "Don't run!" We were frozen in our stance, debating what to do. She turned and started walking quickly. She was laser focused on the trail, not taking her eyes off of it for a second. We all followed closely behind, mimicking her and staring at the person ahead of us. We could still hear a woman's soft whisper in the wind, begging us to go back. One breeze, I could hear her on the wind above me. Then on the next breeze, it sounded like she was right next to me, just off the trail. Her voice was angelic and hypnotizing, and I had to catch myself before I turned to look off to the side trying to find her. We didn't walk much further before Abigail stopped and said that we were right in front of the resort. I finally looked away from the back of Freddie's head and looked around. We were at the water fountain in front of the resort. I couldn't see anything else though. No resort, no lights, no nothing. Even though the snow had stopped falling and the wind had died down, I still couldn't see more than 10 yards in front of me. A thick fog had rolled in, limiting our line of sight. I checked my watch. It was only 5, and the sun wouldn't set for another 30 minutes. Just to be safe, I turned on my headlamp, hoping it would cut through the thick fog. It didn't. A sharp breeze blew through our stopping point. "Help me!" it screamed. We all jumped and looked at Abigail, silently begging her to continue leading us to our campsite. At this point, everyone was borderline jogging, but careful not to make too much of a sound. I could hear the wind start to blow faster and feel the gusts go stronger. Some gusts would carry screams, and the breezes would carry soft cries. I heard a familiar whoosh and noticed the automatic doors to our glamping site. I almost cried out of relief. Krista actually did, after setting her bag down inside and falling into a heap of tears next to it. The automatic doors closed, and for the first time in hours, it was silent. I sank down next to Krista, and the weight of the day weighing me down. A storm began to brew outside. It seemed like we had made it just in time for the snow to start falling hard, and the wind was commanding it. A strong gust of wind blew through, another scream riding alongside it, and the automatic doors opened on their own. The screaming continued even though the wind had stopped. We all scrambled in different directions. Krista and I began sitting on the floor, so we scooted back as fast as we could until we hit the far wall. Abigail and Gabe were over by the kitchenette. I whipped my head around, trying to find Freddie. He was right by the door. I felt my heart lurch in my chest. I saw him trying to push the doors closed, but an invisible force was pushing them back open. I saw Abigail leave her safe haven and run over to the other door to help Freddie. "Where are the keys?" I yelled. I saw a glimmer in the air as Gabe tossed the keys to me. Abigail and Freddie just got the door closed, and I ran between them, quickly locking it. I could hear the wind all the way to the other side, brutally pounding against the glass, like 2 fists beating on it. We all backed away. Hours passed. It was late, and we were still exhausted but too tired to fall asleep. We assumed our sleep positions for the night, huddled together for our protection and warmth. We were too worried about lighting a fire because we didn't want to bring attention to ourselves. The wind only kept getting stronger and more brutal, and right alongside the wind, the woman's voice became clearer and louder. Her screams of desperation turned into screeches of anger. I awoke the next morning. I must have accidentally fallen asleep at some point. The sun was shining and the birds outside were chirping. I looked around and everyone else was still asleep. I decided to get up and bravely looked outside into the forest. Just yesterday, I thought it was so beautiful, and today I shiver in fear. I saw something out of the corner of my eye. There was something moving in the forest. Was it the woman from last night coming to steal us away in the daylight? When the person cut through, I saw it was just an older gentleman carrying a bag of produce. I stepped outside to ask him if he's okay, and that's when I heard a bunch of muttered voices. I walked more into the forest, closer to the resort, and saw people milling around stalls, shopping at the farmer's market. People were laughing and chatting. Children were playing in the water fountain that we stood at last night and heard that awful scream. A chill ran through me as memories flooded my brain. I looked towards the trail from the resort and met up with the trail that we had taken yesterday. There was a big yellow and red sign at the start of the trail. I stepped closer to read what it said. "Warning, hike at your own risk," and "Stay on trails, do not venture off." And underneath these signs were dozens of crosses that people had hung on a rusty nail for protection. I glanced ahead into the forest and could have sworn something was staring right back. I rushed back to my friends who were now awake and packing their things. I was relieved they didn't want to stay another night. Everyone was out the door in record time, and I was doing the final sweep of the space. I checked a drawer and saw some photos of the 2 brothers. I decided to check the back of the photo and see if there was a name or date. There was. In black ink, it read, "Michael and Jared were here, 8/10/2012. Under that, in thick red letters, it said, "The mountain took Jared. Beware of the summit." Chills raked over my body, and I put the photo back in the drawer. We were lucky we didn't fall victim to the legend of this mountain. I met my friends outside the camping spot, and we started the short trek down the mountain. A soft breeze, warmed by the sun, drifted over us. It would have been peaceful if there hadn't been a soft voice that followed and said, "Don't go. Please come back." I had never been so happy to get to my car.
Okay. This wasn't a dream. This was a dream.
I think it was a dream. Correct me if I'm wrong, Katie. I'm pretty sure this was like a dream that she had, that she...
Gotcha. Because I was about to say,
wrote.
what mountain are you in, Katie?
Oh, no.
Like,
I'm pretty sure it was a
the
dream.
Appalach?
It sounds like the Mount Fuji in...
It does.
In Japan. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Like, where are you hiking so I can make sure to never go there?
No, it sounds like a horror movie. That was so well written. I would absolutely watch a horror movie if you directed it, because that sounds fantastic. Also
Write it, direct it, star in it.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
The recollection of detail. Once again, both of you, recollection of detail. Incredible. Impeccable.
Can't remember a lot, but I know my dreams.
That's so impressive. That's so impressive, and it's impressive that you could write this beautiful story.
Yeah, super well written.
So, thank you for writing that. That was so spooky, and I'm definitely going to have to take a sleeping pill to go to bed.
Yeah, that's wild. I hate that for you. I hope you never have that dream again. I hope you only have nice dreams.
You like deserve nice dreams.
You dream little dreams of us. How nice for you.
If you enjoyed that little story, be sure to watch the full episode here.
And make sure you like, subscribe, and all that jazzy.
Jazzy? I see what you did there. Wait, what was that?